Now, I find it quite amazing that we got preachers that like to put the message on trial these days. They like to say, well, the message wasn't proven, and Brother Branham was, we need to put it on trial. But what amazes me, Brother Brad, is they're about 56 years too late. Because the very man that was bringing the message put his own message on trial in front of about 7 congregations. And every time the judge of judges came down in the building and said, it's the truth. It's the truth. It's the same resurrected Jesus Christ that walked the shores of Galilee is back. Are you hearing me? This message is not on trial tonight. We're beyond the trial of this message. We're beyond the claim of is this message truth or not. We have come to Mount Zion where the evidence is walking in human flesh.
People have difficulty with Brother Branham meeting an angel in the cave. They have difficulties with a lot of the events that took place. It don't matter. You say, brother, I don't want to argue with me. Don't waste your time. It don't matter. It happened anyway.
One day while I was occupied in the office at the Bible school, I received a visitor. As he came in, I immediately recognized him as the father of 4 of our Bible school students. His was a highly respected family in our fellowship. But not many days before this, during the campaign, he had flown his wife, sick with cancer, to Saskatoon. He had phoned me from the airport, asking where the ambulance should bring his wife to be prayed for. I made arrangements and placed her in one of the dormitory rooms. That evening, when Mr. Branham had concluded his ministry in the church auditorium, I led him into her room, where he prayed for her and pronounced her healed. Needless to say, we all rejoiced together joyfully. They returned home, believing they had received the healing that his wife so desperately needed. In the first weeks following the campaign, we received one report after another of people whose healing had not lasted. They were either back in their original condition or dead. Now, several days later, this dear brother sat before me in our office, his heart heavy and his mind in turmoil. He had come nearly 200 miles to speak to me. "Brother Pole," he said, "you were there, beside my wife's bed, the night Mr. Branham prayed for her and pronounced her healed. Can you tell me why it is that my wife, who was healed just a few days ago, is now in the grave?" I believe that was one of the hardest questions that I was ever called upon to answer. My heart went out to this dear brother. I felt with him, but how could I answer him? Should I tell him that his and his family's faith had failed? Yet, his was a family that was highly regarded in our denomination for spirituality. Or, on the other hand, should I tell him that perhaps Mr. Branham did not have the gifts of healing after all, and that we were all deceived? To admit this would reflect seriously upon the wisdom and integrity of our denominational leaders who had brought Mr. Branham to Canada to minister in our churches. Actually, I can't remember just what I told our dear brother. But I do know that I did some very serious thinking about all this. I began to seriously question this whole area of our teaching and practice relative to this approach to divine healing. I am not so sure, however, that too many others did the same. But someone might say that his case was an exception. There were then far too many exceptions. Let me cite another case. One afternoon during the healing campaign, I answered a telephone call. The call was from a Pentecostal pastor from Ontario. He had just flown in with his wife, sick with cancer, and her nurse. As on other occasions, I admitted them to a dormitory room, and in due course she was prayed for and Mr. Branham pronounced her healed. Again there was much rejoicing. I remember that the pastor handed me a check of a sizable sum of money to pass on to Mr. Branham. As he did so, he remarked that he couldn't afford to give them much, but that Mr. Branham deserved it because his wife was now healed, and he had spent thousands of dollars on doctors that didn't help her. It was several weeks later that I, as the missionary secretary of our denomination, visited and ministered in our churches in Ontario. When in the vicinity of this pastor's home city, I made inquiry as to his wife's state of health, only to be told that she too had passed away. What a blow that must have been to that dear brother. But that was not all. I was told that he had a good radio ministry in his city. When he had returned from the healing meetings in Saskatoon, he announced over his radio broadcast that his wife had been wonderfully healed. However, just a short while after that, he had to inform his radio audience that his wife had died. I was told that it dealt a severe blow to his radio ministry. My friends, what kind of a testimony is this to the world? To them it does not add up. And there is something wrong. Did this pastor's faith fail? Let me ask, did this sort of thing happen to those who were healed by the Lord Jesus or by his apostles? Where then is it recorded? As Christians, we sometimes think that we're charitable if we overlook these things, but is this real charity or love? Is it loving to permit this type of thing to be carried on in our churches to the needless suffering, agony, disappointment, and expense of the sick? And more importantly, is it scriptural not to deal with the false, the counterfeit? Are we church leaders called upon to protect the sheep or the wolves?